Hello and welcome to VJ's 7th birthday party. My name is Jeanette Shaliga and I have the amazing Bryna O'Sullivan up next. She's going to be talking about 5 common mistakes genealogists make when working with non-English documents. Bryna, thank you so much. Take it away.
Thanks for having me. So let's delve in. This is one of my absolute favorite topics, and I don't get to do it very often. We're going to talk about translation today. And I'm specifically talking about translation, assuming that most of us listening have a primary language of English, but I realize that may not be the case for everybody. Why did I do this presentation? Well, I work as a translator, and I see the same problems come up over and over again. And if you know these problems in advance, trying to work with your records becomes so much easier and so much more likely to be successful. Basic rule of thumb, what's the issue? Not every genealogist is bilingual, but our ancestors might have spoken English and 1, 2, or even 3 other languages. Their records might be in German, French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese. What do we do when we need to read those records, but we only read English? Well, we have a lot of different options, and I'm not going to delve very far into the specific options. More, we are going to discuss some of the common mistakes people make when they start looking at options and deciding what to use. Knowing these mistakes in advance can help you determine which translation techniques and tools are going to be the most effective for your research. Mistake number 1. For some reason, this never happens with English records, but we run into this a lot with non-English records. People mix up or combine transcription and translation. I know you're all familiar with this, but just in case, transcription is defined by the Family Search Wiki as a transcript or transcription is a true word-for-word rendering of a document with the original punctuation and spelling. Why do we use transcriptions in genealogy? Well, initially it started out as an easy way to take home copies of records when you couldn't easily make copies. In translation, we often use them to deal with the fact that the document is handwritten so that we're not trying to read handwriting, think paleography, and translate at the same time. What's the definition of translation? Merriam-Webster describes translation as a rendering from one language into another. Here's the problem that we run into most often. When asking for help with handwritten documents not in English, genealogists often will just ask for translation. I need you to translate this document for me. It's a totally valid request, but there's an aspect of that question most people don't consider. Transcription and translation are 2 different skill sets. This is really important, especially when you're dealing with machine translation. Humans might be able to translate directly from a handwritten document, but it's not easy to do. Why? You're trying to decide if that's an S or an F and figure out the meaning of the word at the same time. It's really easy to make mistakes. It's easier to transcribe, focus specifically on the handwriting, and then to translate. Machine translation programs, think AI, cannot translate from a handwritten document. It's really easy to get confused by this because you can ask AI to translate a document and it will spit something out. They being the machine translation program, are not actually translating. What they are doing is they are transcribing the document, think handwritten text recognition, and then translating from the transcription. Why does this matter? Well, among other things, AI also tends to be really bad at transcription. Treating transcription and translation as 2 separate skills will help you better decide which translation tools are safe to use with your specific text, and will inevitably result in a more accurate translation. As of 2025, AI is not your best option for translating a difficult to read handwritten text unless you've transcribed it first. Second common mistake, I see this one all the time. Assuming that translation is just like looking up words in a dictionary. This actually has a lot to do with how bilingual dictionaries are formatted. If you've ever used a bilingual dictionary, it looks like you can use dictionary to take one word in one language and look up an equivalent in the other. It makes people think that you can actually easily look up words and translate a whole document that way. What they don't realize is that bilingual dictionaries only give you a certain percentage of the meanings for a specific word. Languages are not one-to-one equivalents to each other. This is one of my favorite examples just because it's so opposed. The term an avocat in French can translate as an avocado or a lawyer. Same word, different meanings. You would probably catch this one because it is such a different meaning, but there are other words where, for example, an occupation had two different meanings because the word's meaning changed over time. You wouldn't necessarily catch that, and it's not going to show up in a bilingual dictionary. When a human translator is translating a document, they work to find the most appropriate word in the target language, the language into which the document is being translated, to match the meaning of the word in the source language. That may mean they're choosing from 10, 15, or more words. Boilerplate wording is pretty standard. The stuff we see in every document tends to be formulaic and very standard for each language. Because it is so standard, it's probably in the dictionary. More complex documents, such as a will or a letter, will be harder to translate and may need help from a human translator. Common mistake number 3, people look for the cheapest option all the time. I hear this a lot. Genealogists will skip professional translation because they can't afford it. But you get what you pay for it is as true in genealogy as it is anywhere else. That does not mean you need to hire a translator for every document. It's really helpful instead to ask some questions, starting with, how important is this document for my research? Do I just need the general idea, or am I going to rely on specific details? You just need the general idea. Machine translation is great. It can easily give you enough to start figuring out who the document is about and make you some really general details. How easy is it to make out the individual letters on this document? Am I confident I can recopy it myself? That's that transcription issue we were talking about earlier. How old is this document? Is it likely to use contemporary script, word choices, and spelling? If you've ever tried to translate a pre-World War II German document, you understand why this might be a problem. Is most of the document boilerplate, the wording that was pre-printed on the form because it was used in every record? If so, the language is probably pretty standard. Documents that are fairly easy to read, written in contemporary language, and that use significant amounts of boilerplate often can be translated well. There will still be minor errors, but generally probably 95% accurate with free translation options. This is especially true if you only need the gist of the document's meaning. You have to remember, however, that transcription and translation are two different skills. If you're using a machine translation program or AI, think about retyping documents to increase the likelihood of an accurate translation. Documents with handwriting challenges that do not use contemporary language or that are not boilerplate letters, for example, may require a human translator for accurate translation. Common mistake number 4, assuming that a human translator on a machine translation program has the same skill set. No, you cannot totally replace humans with machines. Machine translation is translation that's done by a computer instead of by a human. Well, there are several different program models, and I can talk about this in far too much detail. Genealogists are probably most familiar with large language models, LLMs. Sometimes we refer to them as AI. Machine translation programs apply some of the same techniques used by a human translator, but humans can be far more flexible. LLMs, large language models, translate based on prediction. If the LLM's training set shows that certain phrases are likely to be translated in certain ways, it will create a translation based on its prediction of the next likely word. Human translators definitely still employ pattern recognition, to a degree. I know working as a translator, I often will be able to figure out what the next word should be simply because I know the boilerplate so well. It's the same process. But the human translator has the ability to add context knowledge and content knowledge. A human can catch that the phrase looks a little strange, or that this might be an older spelling. An unfamiliar word can be looked up. Again, knowing your document will help you understand whether human or computer is a better option. Boilerplate documents typically don't require that much flexibility in translation. Probate files, for example, might. Common mistake number 5, finding their human translator at the local high school or college language department. Not a bad idea entirely, but it's important to remember that language knowledge and content knowledge are 2 separate types of knowledge. Language knowledge focuses on verb tenses, sentence structure, and other aspects of grammar. Content knowledge can help explain the usage of certain vocabulary in a certain period, the meaning of a legal text, and more. By their nature, language departments focus on language knowledge. If your text uses phrasing that would likely be familiar to anyone who speaks or writes that language, they're probably a good fit for your translation project. If the text requires specific content knowledge, something that not everyone would know, you might want to seek out a professional translator. What might require content knowledge? A translation of a 19th century estate inventory that uses fashion terminology unique to the period. Yes, I have had that. 19th century bilingual dictionaries came in very handy for that one. Or an employment contract for a fur trading company. Translation in genealogy is a rule of sometimes. Sometimes you can jump straight into translation. Sometimes you'll need to find someone who can help you transcribe. Sometimes you can use the free tools. Sometimes you'll need paid help. Sometimes general language knowledge will be good enough. Sometimes you'll need content knowledge too. By avoiding these 5 common genealogy mistakes, you'll know which decision is the best one for your project and how to proceed to get the most accurate result so you can work forward. So thank you so much for having me.